Hello, everyone.
Hi,
Welcome to Trail Talk. Look, I'm not by myself today.
I'm here.
Mary's back. Yes, indeed. We're super glad you could join us today. If you've been watching the last couple of weeks, we have had lessons about the history of, well, I guess basically like the cattle ranch industry. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
In Oklahoma, and it was super interesting as far as how tightly woven it was with the cattle drives, which
the
so cool. And then
statehood,
statehood, Indian territory, the whole thing, the working with the tribes, the tribal governments, the US government, the War Department, the everybody. I mean, it was crazy, but
everybody was in the pool.
everybody was there. Yeah.
In the house.
But this week we're going to kind of start introducing you to some of the honestly
better known.
better known. I mean, one of them I think is probably one like the most well-known ranch. The other two, one is a name you'll be familiar with, and the third one I have no idea, and it's probably one of the most historical of all. I'm embarrassed that I had no idea.
Depends on what tickles your fancy.
Right. But I am excited. I am excited to talk about them today. So anyway, without further ado, we're going to kick it off by talking about the Miller Brothers 101 Ranch.
And look at them hats.
Right? These guys are they're looking, they weren't they? They were looking pretty good. Yeah, maybe we could get a little more zoom on the screen, because I think some of the pictures are going to be a little bit smaller, a little more detail to where yeah, that's good right there. Thank you. Wow, 3D coming at you. I feel like I am gigantor.
Please don't adjust your television.
Right. Anyway, so the father, George Washington Miller, first started using his 101 brand in 1881.
Right.
Now, of course, he's not originally from Oklahoma, born in Kentucky. I mean, 1881.
Right.
You know, Oklahoma, we're not even
blinking.
No, I mean Indian Territory.
Yeah.
That's about the only thing. We're several years out from the
Statehood.
Yeah, I think isn't there like a little thing to adjust the brightness? Is that what?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so after the Civil War, he came west like so many others and settled in Missouri, driving cattle from Texas to the railway heads in Kansas. I mean, you know, the typical cowhand
Story.
Yeah. But then he went to Baxter Springs, Kansas, and he moved his ranch to the Cherokee Outlet. I guess he had been on Quapaw land prior to that. Then he got on the Cherokee Outlet, which, if you remember, the Cherokee Outlet was a big part of the story from last week.
Right.
That 60 by 180 mile section of land in the northwest part of, north central to
right there on the Kansas side border.
Yeah, to right before the Panhandle. Right there. So anyway, he moved his cattle up there, cultivated a partnership with the Ponca tribe, and which they were briefly displaced by the Quapaw, but then he said, hey, why don't you guys move to the Cherokee Outlet as well? And so they did. So up to 1881, when he used his brand for the first time, he had a partner named, and please forgive me if I laugh when I say this man's last name, Lee Kokernut. I just think that is a very interesting name. I've never heard
the Kokernut.
The Kokernut. Yeah, that's it. Anyway, the mark that they had used was LK for Lee Kokernut, but he separated, took on his
Different
own
reasons and stories about that.
Right. And why he chose the 101. I mean, the most repeated is that it was the name of a bar saloon in San Antonio. Anyway, so in 1893, of course, referring back to last week's lesson, the government made all of the cattlemen move all of their cattle out of the Cherokee Outlet in 1893. And so that was when he leased land from the Ponca tribe and continued his operations. And it eventually covered more than 100,000 acres of
Yes.
land. I am floored by thinking of that.
100,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, a lot of mowing.
Yeah. A whole bunch of cattle.
Yes, it is.
Anyway, he had three sons, Joseph,
Zachary.
Zachary,
And George.
and George Lee. And so these three became the workers, probably
Right,
his
they-
number one
Yeah, got
hands,
split.
Yeah. At the ranch. But they weren't just a ranch.
No, they had.
Well, I mean,
wheat, cotton,
100,000.
Corn, sorghum, alfalfa, fruit orchard, vegetables, livestock.
Yeah, I mean, they had, 100,000 acres. They chose not to make that all cattle grazing land, and they just,
Kind of diversified.
Yeah.
a bit.
and because obviously this was their way of life
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, it was substantial,
Exactly,
self-sustaining.
yeah. So in 1903, George Washington Miller, the father, died of pneumonia, and his wife turned the ranch into a trust, and the three brothers were the only people named in the trust.
Joe ran the overall operations in the farming. Zach controlled the livestock, and then George handled the finances.
And so, as it can continue to grow, listen to this,
Yeah.
they added their own electric plant, a cannery, a dairy, a tannery, a store, and several different mills. So I have this.
So there wasn't much these people couldn't do.
No, so this is just an aerial picture, and of course, this is not even close
To
to
the
100,000
100,000
acres. This is just the home site
I mean, how
part,
pretty,
isn't it?
I mean.
That just beautiful, and look at those sprawling plains out there.
And then there's another,
Yeah, and I mean, this is a beautiful picture of what the land looked like when the homesteaders came.
now you notice we're in Oklahoma, so it's still flat.
It's flat.
It's still flat.
Yeah, it's very flat, but this is what they came out here and saw. Now, again, I'm not sure how these ranchers were able to maintain all of that property, except that it was not in those initial land runs, because it was on Ponca land in the Cherokee Outland. That wasn't until 1893, but 1893, that was when they had to remove all their cattle because the Cherokee Outland. And so I don't know where the Ponca lands were. For sure, I don't know. I mean, well, obviously it's near Ponca City.
Well,
That's where
right,
the ranch was. But anyway, will you want to check if we're clear or a little bit fuzzy for me? See how
well,
this is
and
looking.
it was
Thank you.
promoted as the greatest diversified farm on earth.
Right. And
They even had an oil company.
right, okay, the name Ernest W. Marland, ring a bell? He was the it's either the 10th or the 15th governor of Oklahoma. He was the one that built the Marland Mansion in Ponca City and married his adopted daughter.
Right, took them out of state.
Yeah, I can't help but look at y'all with just a puzzled expression on my face when I speak of Governor Marland. It is just an interesting story. Thank you, Emery. It's looking better already. So anyway, then and of course he struck oil. He was a really good oil man, Marland was, and he struck oil, and so the ranch made money from that as well. I mean, they were yeah,
Money
hand over
was
fist.
from everywhere.
So then, but the most notoriety came from their Wild West show. And it began in 1905 when they invited members of the National Editorial Association to Bliss, Oklahoma. And I don't know for sure where Bliss is, but I'm gonna say it's somewhere near Ponca City.
Right.
It's up there
Yeah.
somewhere. And they entertained them with a large exhibition that they called Oklahoma's Gala Day, which I also found interesting that they just referred to it as Oklahoma's Gala Day in 1905.
2 years after,
Before
before, yeah,
2
before
years
state.
before
Before
statehood. I don't know if it's because they were in Oklahoma Territory, because that side of the state was
Had already been
Oklahoma.
named Oklahoma Territory.
Yeah, or what, but anyway, well, I thought that was interesting. But it showcased the skills of the ranch hands and American Indians, including the Apache chief Geronimo, who killed a bison from the front seat of a car as part of this show, entertainment exhibition.
Yeah.
So Bliss, Oklahoma was actually one of 101 ranch towns.
Oh,
They
so
had their
it
own
was a
town.
town on the ranch. Thank you for looking that up, Emery. So absolutely, it was in this 100,000 acre amassed area of land that they had. Okay, so that probably was about the 15th. He was about the 15th governor. So there you go. Thank you for looking that up. So many people looking stuff up to help us out today. Anyway, Geronimo's not the only big name that you'll
No.
recognize. Lucille Mulhall, George Elser, who I'm not familiar with, but you guys will recognize Bill Pickett. We've talked about Bill Pickett before, one of Oklahoma's history heroes,
Bulldog.
the great bulldogger who figured out a way to bring a steer down by himself so he could work it. And that was by, of course, grabbing it by the head, twisting its neck while he bit its lip.
Yeah.
And
True story.
overcame the power of the steer. So anyway, Bill Pickett, who I don't know if I remember studying this, that he died. Like, I mean, he died in 1932. I think we already knew that, but he was kicked in the head by one of the horses on the 101 ranch. And that is, yes, that's what killed him.
I don't think we ever talked about.
I don't think so either. And I just, yeah, I found that to be very sad, but of course he was doing what he loved,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and
And knew the consequences.
Yeah.
and things.
Yeah, but I mean, he was very, very successful. They traveled or they performed and they began touring. Like there was a season for these kinds of touring shows. And so that started in 1907. Well, in 1916, they stopped and until 1925, partially because of World War I. And then they mobilized again and ran until 1931. In 24, probably kicking off
Mhm.
the resurgence of the
right.
show, they performed in Bliss for the National Editors Association. And then they went through the United States and worldwide, Mexico, Canada, Europe, South America. They performed for King George V and Queen Mary of England. And then perhaps my favorite story. In Mexico, Bill Pickett, I'm going to read, aroused the ire of the bullfighters and the crowd by trying to bulldog one of their prized fighting bulls.
Can you imagine him going in and they're like,
Yeah, especially when he goes in to bite really hard on fighting bull's mouth. I can
you
only
ever seen
imagine, yeah, I can only imagine how crazy
the
that
shock and awe.
must have been. The whole crowd probably one
Gas.
gas. Yeah. Anyway, that I feel like that's a really funny story. But then also Will Rogers, Tom Mix, Jack Hoxsey, Mabel Norman, Buck Jones. I mean,
They all
that
joined in.
yeah, it was quite the production. And
Even
Buffalo-
the- yeah.
yeah.
Boxing champion, Jess Willard.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And then in 1916, they combined with Buffalo Bill, and he like had his own separate show, but they toured together.
Right. I like
And-
the opening act.
Yeah,
Thing, maybe.
yeah. And so that was a thing. But then in the 20s, smaller crowds. And it was kind of the same thing that when we talked to Anna from the Pawnee Bill Ranch and Museum, that happened with the Pawnee Bill show. Movies, moving pictures
Mhm.
began,
Mhm.
and circuses, yeah, rodeos were actually being, competition
Right.
rodeos were happening that people could go watch. And so the whole Wild West show lost its glory, I guess. And these other, Pawnee Bill kind of tried to hop on the circus thing, and I think because he got very exotic with his
Mhm.
shows. But anyway, the 101, between all of those things changing, and then the Great Depression,
Mhm.
and very sadly, I feel like it just ended in 1926. just on the verge of the Great Depression, they lost almost $120,000 in 1 year.
And that back then, people, oh,
I don't even know
what
in
it would
today's
equate
dollars,
to, yeah, today.
but, anyway, in 1927, Joe, well, I was gonna show you some pictures from some of these other, here's Tom Mix. He went on to be a silent movie star. In fact, I think we have some movie posters or something that have Tom Mix, out there. Yeah. And then there's Pawnee, Bill, and Zach Miller, the brother. So George passed away in 1929, and then Zach he lived until 1952, but in 1931 he could not keep the finances going. And remember, the trust only had the three of them, and I feel like because their mother established it, that until the third one passed, no one they couldn't change.
Nothing could be put into place,
Legally,
right?
yeah, done. I mean, I don't know that for a fact, but I just kind of talking to people about other situations that possibly is what happened. So at any rate, in 1932, well, in 31, the ranch went into receivership. In 32, it was divided and leased, and the personal property was auctioned. And in 1941, the Federal Farm Security Administration had acquired most of the land and developed a farm resettlement program on it. So thus ended the great days of the Miller 101, but it just really survives as far as being historically significant. And
It wasn't just a ranch. I mean,
Right.
there was many other things and outlets that it went through and, you know,
and as far as like the history of how these ranches kind of established, how the cattle got here in those large numbers and were grazing on the Native Americans' land, that this story ties
Ties
right
right into
in
that.
with all that.
Correct,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, it's really interesting. Here are some members of the Wild West show. I thought this was great. Look at the size of that cast.
Yeah.
I mean, that is enormous. And these people, this
got
is
along.
this
got
is,
along.
yeah, and this is one reason that it costs so much. This was something that Anna talked about with the Pawnee Bill show. They had to provide transportation, meals, costumes, healthcare for all of these performers. And
Yeah, because you can't be expected to leave home, go on the road, do all this, just have
Right.
kindness in
they,
your heart.
yeah, I mean, imagine booking, this is a worldwide show. They had to book ships, well, like rooms for
Going
everyone.
King George, you know.
Exactly,
I mean,
yeah. Yeah, so anyway, pretty interesting. Okay, so the next one we're gonna talk
Drummond
about is the Drummond Ranch.
It's one
And
I've seen her.
yeah, and yes, this is associated with Reed Drummond,
Pioneer woman.
the pioneer woman up in Pawhuska, Osage County.
In fact, this is even shown in the intro to her show. It shows
Yeah.
that sign.
Yeah, so the Drummond Ranch traces back to Frederick Drummond, who lived 1864 to 1913, came to the former Osage Nation in Indian Territory.
At 22.
Yeah, in 1886. So he had immigrated from Scotland a few years before, spent a year in New York, went to Texas to try his hand at ranching.
Mhm.
Everybody wanted to be a rancher in those days. Didn't have much success, went to St. Louis, worked in a wholesale dry goods store, and then one of his customers owned the Osage Mercantile Company in Pawhuska and hired him to work as a clerk
Can you
there.
imagine living there and being,
I know, I just,
I like the way you sell stuff.
Yeah.
Me.
you're quite a sales clerk. You want to relocate?
That's right.
Yeah, and so he moved to Osage Nation, met Addie Gintner, and they married in 1890. And so here is, to give you an idea, here's a map of Oklahoma. Osage County is the largest county in Oklahoma.
Believe it or not.
Yeah, and so here it is blown up. And so you'll hear some of the names of some of these surrounding communities, but yeah, here's Pawhuska. And this was all part of the,
Tulsa's right down here.
yeah, Tulsa, here's Owasso.
Ponca City, which we just talked about right over here.
Yeah, Bartlesville. So, yeah, I stretched all the way over
Mhm.
to the, in fact, that edge right there is probably just the east side of the Cherokee Strip. Yep, that's right. Okay, so, they were very popular. Frederick and Addie were very popular in Pawhuska. And in 1903, they moved to Hominy.
Right here.
And they organized the Hominy Trading Company. At one time, it was the nation's largest dealer of Pendleton blankets, which the Osage people
Was one of their
favored. And let's see, so 1903, so the Osage, now, just a little tiny bit of history on how this came to be Osage land. They had lived up here in Kansas. This is the Kansas line,
Yeah.
you can see. They had lived in Kansas. Farmers came, wanted their land. And so they came down into Indian Territory and they said, we want the rockiest land that there is. Because they thought that way farmers are not gonna wanna take their land. And what they didn't know was that there was oil underneath all those rocks.
Oil up in there.
That's right, that's right. And so the Osage became some of the wealthiest people, at
That
least
oil
in the oil in the nation. When they started drilling for oil up here, they had the mineral rights.
Yeah.
And no matter what happened to the land on top, they kept their mineral rights. And anyway, that all goes into the Killers of the Flower Moon, coming hopefully soon to a theater near you, or pick up the book in the library and read it because it is fascinating. Now, I chased that
I
rabbit
digress.
as far as I'm going to go. Anyway, they have this home in Hominy. Look at this home.
So pretty.
Right, and it's actually on the National Register of Historic Places.
It's like cabin underneath, party up top.
Right? I mean, it is beautiful, and imagine what a showpiece that was.
Oh, back in the day?
Yeah, before Oklahoma was even a state.
Right.
See, these towns were formed,
Registries.
and there were some homes around before Oklahoma became a state. It's very interesting how all that just kind of happened on top of each other. Anyway, 3 sons, they all attended college. They
Roy
began Roy, Frederick, and Alfred
Or Jack.
or Jack. I would go.
Yes.
They began ranching in 1913, and Jack established ranches in Osage and Marshall counties. And by the 1980s, the brothers and their descendants managed more than 200,000 acres in Oklahoma and southern Kansas, which kind of brings us, I'm going to jump forward real fast to the Drummond Ranch, the picture that we were looking at here. So this is land
One of the brothers.
that,
Or
well,
sons.
a descendant. He is so the original Frederick Drummond is his like great grandfather, maybe great, probably great grandfather. It's yes, because her last name's Drummond. Yeah, what's his name?
The husband or the?
Her husband, her father.
Lad.
Lad. I was like,
Yeah.
I was in my
Yeah.
sound.
So Ladd is a direct descendant of Frederick, the original Frederick Drummond.
Right.
So then Frederick Gintner, or Gintner, I think.
It's getting.
There is a man named Gintner Drummond who is either a state official, a state senator, or he's on, he holds some state office, and he is also
A descendant of
a
that.
descendant. I mean, he has this name, Gintner Drummond.
Yeah, that's not just a name you hear.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so Frederick Gintner Drummond graduated from Oklahoma A&M in 1914. Now it's Oklahoma State, and then went to Harvard Business School, came back to run the Hominy Trading Company after his father died, got married and had 3 sons and a daughter. And during the Great Depression, he established 2 Hereford cattle ranches in Osage County, which we'll go back to this map, south of Hominy and west of Pawhuska, one down here and then one out over here. And they totaled 25,000 acres when he died in 1915. And then the operation fell to his son, Frederick Ford Drummond, who went to Oklahoma State and Stanford. And then he worked for a bank and determined the best way to do his job was to go where the cattle barons congregated. Okay,
So he's like, oh, we'll just gonna
yeah,
see it.
so in the mid-1900s, this fella went to San Antonio, Pawhuska, Emporia, Kansas. Until the demise of the railroads, the cattle market in Oklahoma and surrounding states was made at these hotels. So I'm not sure what the demise of the railroads were. That sounds like another trail talk lesson to pursue, but I have a feeling that railroads, I think, the smaller railroad companies went out of business and like they were taken over by big ones and fewer trains ran. You know, there are a lot of track that's not
Right. Oh,
used
yes.
or,
Yes.
you know, and so I have a feeling that that's what they're talking about because people probably started using cars in the mid-1900s. They began to fly instead of ride by rail.
Right.
So anyway, so Frederick Drummond's education and banking experience, this is Frederick Ford Drummond, and I was trying to look up the links, between Ladd Drummond and the original Frederick Drummond. And so Ladd has like a second cousin named Ford.
Oh,
And I have a feeling Ford may be a direct descendant of this one, Frederick Ford Drummond, who was the banker.
okay.
I didn't
Get a family tree.
yeah, there wasn't anything that drew it out for
Yeah.
me. I found pictures from a family reunion.
Mm.
And so that's how that kind of fell out. Anyway, but they were, he was a member of the Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association from the age of 7.
I mean,
I believe,
getting in there early.
yeah. Oh, and he was training his son Ford. This
Right.
is it to be a 4th generation
Right,
Drummond rancher.
Right.
So
His son Ford.
his son Ford, so that would probably make Ladd a 4th generation also. And yeah, even though I think it's like his second cousin because it's like his grandfather was a brother, and so his father would have been a cousin of Ford, or he would have probably been Frederick Ford's cousin, first cousin, so the sons would be second cousins, yeah. I don't know, something like that, that whole cousin thing, but anyway, so yes, there is a Drummond Cattle Association or something like that, and so these cousins, Ladd and his brother and a cousin own this company, and they were, this land that is associated. Here's Frederick Ford Drummond, the one who was not the original.
The original Ford though.
Yes, yeah, the original Ford, the one who was the banker. Yeah, that's a picture of him. All right, now we're going to our next one, the Stewart Ranch, and I'm Edie Stewart, but this is not the
Different
same
spelling?
way I spell it, yeah. Anyway, so the Stewart Ranch,
No
get
claim to
this,
fame on that.
no claim to fame, yeah, I got nothing. Did you find Gittner Drummond by chance?
Said he was an attorney.
Mm. Maybe he ran for an office or something, not too long ago. Okay, so the Stewart Ranch is the oldest ranch in the state of Oklahoma under continuous family ownership.
That is something.
It
You know anything
is.
about family ranching and farming?
I
It's
mean,
like unheard of.
my mouth is hanging open. I believe it was 1868,
When it came to be.
whenever it started. Yes,
Sarah
as,
died in 1868.
yeah. Robert Clay moved his family for a short time located northwest town.
63 maybe?
Maybe it was, but they have been a continuous for 6 or 7 generations now. This branch has been in this family.
Yeah.
I find it just to be
It is.
so
Because
amazing.
usually pieces get sold off, families get disinterested. That generation may not want anything to do with the farming arrangement.
It goes under, they couldn't survive the Great
Right.
Depression or
They have
other
survived.
thing, and some, yes, they have managed to survive.
Did you find something?
He is an American attorney, rancher, banker, and politician.
And he was a member of the Republican Party and the Republican nominee for the Attorney General of Oklahoma in the 2022 election.
There you go, running for Attorney General. Okay.
Thank you.
I knew that he was associated somehow, but Gittner Journal, he has to be associated also. So these are pictures from back in the day. The barn, the buggy, looks like a little buggy with fringe on top. Actually, I'm not gonna start singing an Oklahoma song, but
It's going to the,
yeah.
stage.
Yeah, going headed to the States, right? This big old herd of Hereford cattle, yeah. My husband was here, he would be able to tell us exactly what that car is.
Kind of slant thing.
Yeah, I think it
It's
might
all-
be a Hudson,
It's all
like in the movie Cars, the
Oh, yes,
Hudson.
yes.
I think that's what it looks like, but I don't know. Viewers, if any of you know, go ahead, tell me if I'm right or wrong. Yeah, but just kind of an idea of, what the place has looked like and how long it's been a part of, and it's located by Warrika. It's in Warrika. Yes, I mean, it's so close. I'm thinking about reaching out and seeing if someone from their ranch would like to be on Trail Talk and tell us about the history of their ranch.
We carry their beef jerky,
We do?
their beef jerky, they have the gift shop, which one is your ranch.
That's right, it is.
Yeah.
I knew when we started carrying.
Yeah. I know that I read this, that it is maybe because I looked it up on, I mean, it's huge. Yeah, did it say in here anyway? Well, yeah, we'll get there.
Okay.
But it is down by
Oh, you think
Warrika, or at
it's-
least a portion of it is. It's very big. So, Robert Clay Freeney, yeah.
Gone with the wind.
Rhett Butler.
Yes.
Yeah. But look at this hairstyle. This is coming back.
Hey,
As a
it's not
matter of
already.
fact, Emery's kind of got that sweet.
If it ain't back already, that's
Uh-huh.
right.
It's back. It's here.
Now you pull up someone with a mullet, we're gonna.
Right, yeah. Okay, so he came by stagecoach in 1838 to Fort Towson, Choctaw Nation, Indian Territory, and the Choctaws would have just arrived. In 1838, they would have just traveled the Trail of Tears and got here to Oklahoma. And he married Sally Ellis, who was the daughter of John Ellis, the Choctaw son of Mashula Tubby. And I wish I knew how to say that properly with Choctaw inflection.
Right.
But that Moshula Tubby was a famous chief of the Choctaw Indians when they were in Mississippi. So they had a son who went by Clay. And he was 13 years old when the family moved to Boggy Depot. And it's a branch of the Old Texas Road, but it's near Atoka, which is Choctaw, land is kind of southeast, and Atoka is over there kind of south of McAllister. And that was the Boggy Depot was the principal Confederate commissary north of Texas during the Civil War. So then Sarah died, his mother died. Yeah, and at the time of her death, she was 46 years old. And get this, she had 12 children. Yeah, she had 12 children. And this is Robert Clay. They just named him as Robert, but Robert Clay was his name. So in 1868, he moved his family west of Caddo and then located in what was now known as the Redlands. So there's a story about him in something called the Caddo Herald, must have been the newspaper of the day. Yeah, he was a progressive Choctaw, gathered his education from the Indian school at Whitebead and from the early Christian missionaries who visited the country in the early days. In midlife, he accepted the teaching of the missionaries and became consistent Methodist. So he became very active in church, and he was the first man to this is from the article, stick a plow into the black waxy land soil of northern Bryan County, the first to realize that such land would prove responsive to tillage. Because the Choctaws just used it as grazing
Right,
land.
didn't think of.
Yeah, I don't know if the soil just looked very different from what they were accustomed to.
Therefore, they thought it was
Yeah,
unmanaged or
Yeah.
couldn't,
wouldn't,
grow
wouldn't,
anything.
yeah, I don't know, but anyway, so the article just goes on to, it has a lot of praise for him. And talked about how even though he was, Choctaw, how he brought the Choctaw and the white people together. And just what an outstanding citizen
He
he
was a
was.
nobleman among primitive people.
Yes, yeah. He was probably about 20 years old at the time when he acquired a part of the land that they call Freeney Valley. Anyway, they farmed corn and had hay and rangeland. And then he married Josephine Baxter after his wife, his first wife died, and they had 7 children. He raised cattle, horses, mules, and farmed. And in 1902, that was when he became the county and probate judge of Blue County, Choctaw Nation, Indian Territory. His only daughter with Josephine was named Carrie Ida Freeney, and she attended Tuskahoma Choctaw School for Girls. And her transportation to school consisted of a buggy ride from the ranch to Caddo, where she caught the MK&T passenger train to Durant. And then she changed and rode to Hugo, and then changed the train and to ride to Antlers, where buggies were provided to get the girls to Tuskahoma, which is, goodness,
North of Antlers.
yeah,
That's what,
that's a
imagine what
trip.
time she had to get up in the morning.
Right? Exactly.
Might as well just stay the night.
Yeah, so then, Robert Terry Stewart, was, let's see, he had to have been,
He was
One,
born as Champ and Betty Rain.
so perhaps that was,
18.
Robert, one of Robert Clay's sons. I was looking for the names of his, that was his family. I was just wondering, did they say that, the names of his children that he had 7 children with Josephine.
So he had 7, and he
And
had
so
1 daughter.
Robert Terry was probably one of those. Well, no, Champ Terry. I don't know.
Where's Ida come into? Ida Freeney Stewart.
Huh. This was, the information on their website was a little bit hard to follow, but this is all taken from the Stewart Ranch website. Okay, well, I don't know. Chance Terry, there was not one named Terry, so, okay. So, he, knew the trails and byways of the Texas Plains. He had a way with lassos and a doggy. That's an excerpt from the book. This is Colonel Stewart by
2
Henry
brothers
Bennett.
and 2 sisters. So.
I don't know either. Anyway, so he taught school, so life insurance, and then went on to study. He wanted to study law. His life-saving occupation came as a windfall, hauling rock, and he made a killing. He joined the Pacific Mutual Insurance Company at 28 and became president
American
of the American Life Insurance Company in Fort Worth. In 1916, bought Mid-Continent Life Insurance Company in Muskogee and moved the company to Oklahoma City. So he was really big into insurance. So Ida Freeney Stewart, so she was, oh, okay.
That's what I was trying to.
Yeah, so Robert Terry Stewart married into the family.
Okay.
He must have married Ida. That has to be what this part is talking about, that he married Ida. Was she one of those, or was she one of Was she one of Robert Clay's sisters? Or,
Children were James, John, Andrew, Elizabeth, Sarah, Mary.
okay, she must have been one of Robert Clay's
Mm.
daughters. Yeah, so, anyway, she just shares some information, and her dad was a judge, a well-known man, you know. Oh, wait, Carrie Ida with his second wife Josephine, that's who that is.
Yes, okay.
Carrie Ida Freeney, and she went by Ida, and she married Robert Terry Stewart. Okay,
There we
there
go.
you go, there you go.
It's flowing now.
Yeah, and so then she talks about that when the boys went to war, and wars have a way of changing things, and she was probably talking about the First World War.
Right, correct.
So in 1930, Colonel Stewart met Ida Freeney, and they were married in 31. There we go. And it was the wish of Judge Freeney that his only daughter to have the family homestead. And Bob Stewart was born to Ida and Colonel Stewart, and he continued building the ranch and its legacy until his death in 2001. So then one of their children is named Terry Stewart Forrest. She is one of 4 daughters.
Female.
Yes, yeah, she is one of 4 daughters born to Bob and Ida. And this is a picture of her. This is a fairly recent picture. She has 2 sons, Robert and Clay. Yeah, and probably a grandson here. But they both have family names, Robert Freeney, Clay Freeney.
Yeah.
And so she was widowed. And in 1976, she was, wait a minute, she became the manager in 1992. But she was newly widowed, the mother of 2 boys, had graduated with an animal science degree from Oklahoma State. Yeah, learned the business side of ranching through the Oklahoma Ag Leadership Program and Texas Ranch Management Program from Texas Christian. And the cattle operation has improved. The horse program has gained notoriety. She served as president of the Oklahoma Cattlemen's Association, was named the 2007 Oklahoma Cattleman of the Year, and was inducted into the National Cowgirl Hall of Fame in November 2007. So she has been a real live ranch cowgirl her whole life.
She has lived,
Yeah,
it wasn't like she was just given it and had to deal with it. That's something she had a passion for.
exactly. And it was passed down through her family, and she just really strongly believes that she's doing what her dad would want her to do.
Says she's been recognized as a woman who has excelled in her field while exemplifying the pioneer spirit of the American.
I mean, how amazing is that? So, this, as I said, part of this ranch is near Warrika. So this, I mean, I forget how many acres this ranch covered. I got so excited about the history of everyone in the family that I forgot to put all of that.
How much acreage?
Yeah. But it's extremely large. They have a cattle side, and then they also have
Production.
a horse side. And they raise horses that are very well-known breeding stock. And these horses have been, like, they won the like Remuda of the Year award. And yeah, I mean,
National
their
recognition.
their horse
Stock.
part of their ranch is really well known. Also, they had at one time where you could go out and hunt on their land, but I think that part of the business maybe has been ceased. Yeah, has ceased now. I couldn't find anything current about that on their website. But very interesting. I mean, look up the Stewart Ranch. Their website's really good, and they have a lot of pictures and a lot of information
And like you said,
about the ranch.
We sell their beef jerky. now here
Exactly. We
at our
got their
gift
beef
shop.
jerky here, so come on by and get you some. But these are 3 pretty well-known ranches here in our state, and there are a lot more that we'll be talking about in the time to come. We may go ahead and do another one next week if it's still Yeah, it'll be August 31st or August 30th.
Mhm.
August 31st is next week, next Wednesday, right? Yeah, next Wednesday, August 31st.
Or cattle ranchers month.
Yeah, we might just devote it to Cattle Ranchers
What
Month.
I'm reading right now is they do still have the guided hunts that is actually conducted by Clay.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
all
And
right,
then Robert is actually responsible for the day-to-day force operation.
okay.
Does it say
very
many
good.
acres?
Thank you, Emery.
farm is?
I have not been able to
Okay,
find that.
okay. Does it say it's at Waurika or it's near Waurika?
All it says is Jefferson County.
Jefferson County, well,
It's probably.
there you go, that's about. Or sorry, are
just
there
the
any other
county.
towns in
Whole
Waurika?
county.
Are there any other towns in Jefferson? Right, probably just about the whole
Do it
county.
around.
It was like some 40-something thousand acres, I believe.
It's a big chunk.
Big chunk, yeah. So anyway, we hope you guys have learned some interesting things about some ranches here in Oklahoma, some still going, some not anymore,
Part of our
but it's just part of our history. And be sure and tune in tomorrow. We're gonna have several people here to talk about the Community Heart and Soul, which is a new program that's coming to Duncan. I hate to just call it a program, but it's really going to be interesting. Someone from the National Community Heart and Soul Organization is going to zoom in. Chris Rao and Chris Deal are going to be here to talk about it. Alan Gates is going to hopefully be able to zoom in, and we're going to just introduce you guys to this and just let them kind of tell us the motivation and where the idea came from, and just kind of share all about it. So you'll want to join us tomorrow for that. And we'll see you
Yeah, that's
then.
it.
Yeah.
So we're
So-
leaving.
Oh, wait, here
For
we go.
tomorrow.
You know,
You guys know what to do.
yeah, okay. Happy
Happy
trails.
trails.